come here, no, it's less for the talking, but just to sit here for me is enough. Sit here for 1 hour quietly and go back. That in the Zoom thing, I'm in my own energy spaces now. It was
Exact same talk last week.
yeah. So I'm reading one beautiful book, poems written from Tao Te Ching, and it says that the truth, the beauty is never in the word that we are saying. That's all just traveling, but it's in the emptiness from where they are arising.
Yes.
That means if somebody is telling you something, you can't ask them to clarify because then the whole thing is lost.
You see, these words are not important. When one taps into the silence, there's something very deep here. See, as it is said, there are 4 stages of speech: Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama and Vaikhari. Para is the source, the silence, from which the thought emerges. The thought gets translated into language and words inside and emerges as speech. So without para, which is the silence, which is the presence, there is no speech. They are all born in the para. And that is why sages like Ramana Maharshi, by their mere glance, could share that silence with those who came in front of him. For some people, the words are what draw them to a teaching first, because it's something new which their conditioning has not seen this perspective. It's intriguing. It's a new way of living. And it is those words which then move backwards to the para because they quieten the mind. So either way, one is going back, going in reverse to the para. It's so beautiful. And the speech of an enlightened being comes from para. So they don't know what they are going to say in the next moment, because if they did, that would mean a linear process in time, like, thinking what am I going to speak about tomorrow, etc., etc., and laying down a map of a speech. That is another approach. But generally, the spontaneity comes from the source. There was a man, a devotee of Bhagwan, who said, I read your booklet, he said to Bhagwan, on who am I. It was very logical. Then I came to see you, and I must confess that I am so drawn to your form, but the booklet I cannot put into practice. I find it very hard. I am drawn to your form. The booklet got me to you. It made sense when I read it, logical sense. I agreed with it. Thereafter I came to see you. But then I realized I'm hooked onto your form and I'm not really able to follow the logic in the booklet, put it into practice. And Bhagwan replied, he said, to catch a fish, the bait is put at the end of the fishing line. The purpose is to catch the fish. The purpose is not to put the bait. Means the fish has been caught. The devotee has been caught. So, whether or not he understood the words is irrelevant. The mind has not been able to make sense or implement the teaching, but the devotee is hooked. What is that hook? That is something that does not involve the limitations of the mind, because the mind has admitted, I am not able to put your teaching into practice, yet I am drawn. That is the thing. That is the silence. That is the para. That is the grace. The result is peace. A sense of peace which was not there before. Something shifted, something changed when I met this person, when I came across this teaching. Something that has made life lighter. Something that has made the burden of life and living lighter. And the peace of mind is in direct proportion to the teaching being lived. There's this famous incident of a European who came to Bhagwan, young man, and he had written something on a slip of paper and he presented it to Bhagwan. Bhagwan read it, put it down, looked at him, and they both closed their eyes. And hours passed away. The lunch bell rang. None of them was disturbed. The others in the hall were also sitting in silence. And at the same time, they both opened their eyes, and the European took leave of Bhagwan and left. And Bhagwan said the most beautiful thing. He said, someone asked him, what happened with this exchange? This such a deep exchange. And he said, when you come to the ocean with a cup, that is all you get. When you come to the ocean with a bucket, you can fill up your bucket only to the extent of the size of the bucket. But very few come to loot the ocean. And this man came to loot the ocean. To loot the ocean. That is what a true devotee does. Even the simplest of Bhagwan's devotees, the cooks in the kitchen, they themselves have said, if we think of Bhagwan all the time while cooking, the food becomes tastier. That is looting the ocean. If a teaching is lived all the time, with whatever one encounters, people or events in one's life, if that is seen through the prism of the teaching, that is looting the ocean. But if we are selective and certain people we still blame and condemn, others we accept they are instruments of God, that means one is going to the ocean with a cup. Because this is all or nothing. There are no in-betweens. There may be in-betweens as part of a process of the deepening of a teaching. But ultimately, one has to accept that everyone is an instrument of the divine, and whatever events happen, good or bad, can only happen because it is God's will. And I was thrilled when my sister sent me a clip of Eckhart's in one of his recent talks, where he said, when I'm asked about what's going on right now in the world, he said, to use old-fashioned theistic language, one could call it the will of God. It all comes down to that. So when we accept that both good and bad are the same will in operation, and to make it clear, accepting does not mean being walked on and all those other connotations which the ego thinks it means. But when we accept that good and bad come from the same source, we kind of rise above the duality of existence. We don't get swayed by the polaric opposites of life. To be more accurate, life is duality, but we don't get swayed by the dualism of life, choosing one over the other. When we stop making sense of life, which we've been doing all the time, connecting the dots, thinking of all cause-effect relationships, this happened, so this happened, so this happened, the excessive use of the thinking mind. When we stop trying to make sense of each and everything in life, then it is an indication that we are accepting the will of the source. We are in acceptance of it. May not make sense, but we give up beyond a point, trying to understand why did it happen? How did it happen? What did I do wrong? There is a beautiful incident which illustrates this. One of Bhagwan's devotees asked him, he said, I read I think it is in the Shiv Purana, that anyone staying in a radius of 30 miles of Arunachala gets liberated. And Bhagwan said, that's right. So the devotee said, is that fair? Because it could mean that I am a murderer, I am a thief. It doesn't make sense. That means all I have to do is go and stay there in the radius of 30 miles and I'll get liberated. It is unfair. And Bhagwan replied, what to do? It is the decision of the Privy Council. And why he said that? Because this devotee was a lawyer. And in those days, the British courts, it was, I think, pre-independence. So Bhagwan was well aware that the devotee knew what Privy Council meant, the highest authority. And Bhagwan said, in this case, it is the decision of Shiva. What can you do? It doesn't make sense. But that is the decision of Shiva. So if anything does not make sense, try to make sense of it, but if it doesn't, say it is the decision of the Privy Council. Be at peace. We had an incident 2 days ago. One of our new titles was uploaded on Amazon. It was doing well. And suddenly it disappeared. Amazon delisted it. So the team, including myself, were very concerned because if this starts happening, it's not good for business. Now the usual process will follow. They will write long mails. Amazon will say, give us further proof why this happened. Was your pricing this? That whole train of activity will begin. But with this understanding, why did it happen? How could they do this? Privy Council. Who knows? So one lives life like that. One still does what one thinks and feels one should do, but that entire burden is lifted from one's shoulders. Disappointment may arise. Hurt in the moment may arise. But these are fleeting, temporary, because the acceptance is very deep that nothing can happen unless it is meant. all noise, whether it is the television, whether it is the sound, a roaring sound like a waterfall or an earthquake, emerges from silence and disappears into silence, like words. But it appears that when the sound is there, the silence is not there, because the attention has moved to the sound. But it is only the movement of attention to the sound which makes one feel that one has left the silence. But the silence is always ever there. And when one is resting more and more in being, even when there is sound, that sound is witnessed as a movement in consciousness. The awareness of that sound is the silence. Sound cannot be aware of sound. Even if one says there are so many thoughts going on in my head right now, that is only possible with the awareness of that, which is the silence. So one cannot escape the silence ever. But on this journey, what happens is we rediscover it. We rediscover it. The purity of that silence, the beauty of that silence is rediscovered.